Oh my God, there's the little blue book
What's that?
over there.
What's the little blue book?
Oh, no, there's a little blue book with that cover on it.
Okay.
It's history.
Yay.
Are you going to ask me the same thing you did the last time?
I am.
Okay.
I'm sorry. There's everybody's phone. But we can do it. So I think well, we can try to make it as quickly.
Well, I'll be the one that'll talk and blab forever. You know that.
But it was so
Okay.
good. I'm sad. So we're going to just do
Me
it again.
too.
So can you hear audio okay from her?
Yes, this
Okay.
is great.
So again, just look at me and pretend like they're not
Yes,
there.
yes, ma'am.
And-
I don't even see them.
Okay.
Where'd they
They're
come
not
from?
there.
Okay.
Cameras aren't there.
They
Nothing's
can't.
there.
There, right.
Great. I
Okay.
will say that it picks up everything.
Yeah,
So
I won't say anything. I'm
But
not,
let's not go more than 30 minutes, guys, because
Okay, let's go.
I have something else to do.
Okay.
No, that's okay. Okay, so just go ahead and introduce yourself and in a one sentence kind of tell us your relationship to Nucci Space.
Okay. My name is Linda Phillips. I'm the founder of Nucci Space, and I'm Nucci's mom.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about Nucci and why you decided to start the organization. And you can do this a little bit briefer than you did on Tuesday, however you want
Sure,
to.
okay. Nucci's my son, and he had suffered from depression for about 5 years. And he had made a serious suicide attempt in 1991. And that's when he started getting help. He was diagnosed with depression and started receiving help then. And did really well. Came to University of Georgia in 1992, and he struggled. He had good times and bad times. And in 1996, I think he got tired and realized just how sick he was. And he had told us he did not want to spend his life in and out of hospitals. And I think he just really ran out of energy, and he killed himself. So that was in 1996. And we knew that we wanted to do something to remember him. And he was a musician, and also having suffered from depression, we wanted to do something with music and depression, and we wanted it to be something hands-on that went directly to the person who suffered from depression. So I just came up with the idea one day of founding a place where musicians can practice, and with the money that we made from practice rooms, we could use that to pay for the mental health counseling. And then that's how Nucci Space got started.
Perfect.
How was that?
Great. I think that was.
I could say these things in my sleep. You do know that.
I know. You're
I've only
intimately
said
familiar
'em.
with it all.
Wrote a book about it.
So, that's true.
Yeah, that's true.
So can you tell us a little bit about some of the challenges you talked about on Tuesday with actually the logistics of starting the foundation and moving into Nucci Space?
As far as starting the foundation, I've never done anything like this. And one of the things I hate most in life is fundraising. I do not like asking for money. And that's not a very good thing when you want to start a nonprofit. But after Nucci died, and when I finally got the idea, which was about in 1998, I wrote a letter to everybody I knew, and or ever even looked at or smiled at, and telling them what I wanted to do and asking them to help me with money. And I got back $30,000 from that, which we consider that seed money. And I had come to Athens to talk to a group of therapists about starting a Nucci Space here. And the exciting thing about this group of therapists I talked to, they were all either musicians or artists for the most part. And they understood right away what I wanted to do and were supportive. So when I went back to Atlanta, a few days later, I got a call from one of the therapists that I had met saying, we have a young musician sitting in front of me now who needs therapy but can't afford it. Can you help? So we started doing the mental health counseling part before we opened the doors of Nucci Space with that $30,000 I had raised. So by the time we opened our doors in 2000, we had a real handful of therapy patients that we were helping.
Perfect. So, can you talk a little, we didn't cover this on Tuesday, but can you talk about how your role has changed in the organization since you started it over
Sure.
the last 16 years?
Yeah, my role in the organization, which is really interesting because I've always had a secret desire to be a therapist. And my idea here for Nucci Space is not to do any therapy on site because I didn't want a clinical atmosphere here. But I knew that we needed an advocate because what makes Nucci Space different from another referral service is that once we get a patient into therapy, we stay with them. We work with the therapist, we work with the psychiatrist, and we work with the person who's being treated. And we're their support system. And I think that's really most important, and it's one of the things that makes us different. So I am a registered nurse, and I've had psychiatric nursing experience. So I got to use that, and I also got to use my desire to be a therapist. And in my role as advocate of NutriSpace, and my role was better than a therapist, really, because I could hug. I could go out to their house and say, why didn't you keep your appointment? I was a mother figure, but I wasn't their mother. And I think that was hugely helpful at the beginning. But in saying that and being the advocate, and when we first started, I was on call 24/7 for several years. As far as running the space, I didn't want my face on it. I wanted other musicians. I wanted this to be a place run by peers, because that's what's going to attract musicians to come into the space.
Perfect. So you talked about this on Tuesday, but can you tell us about meeting Bob and your relationship with him since the founding?
Sure, yeah. One of the things I knew for sure was that I needed a musician who was able to run an organization and to grow it. And that was, I mean, I've never done anything like that, and I really couldn't do that and without being the face of NutriSpace, and I didn't want that. So I had looked around, and I had worked with some other young men, but it was never quite right. And then one day, a group, and I think it was Bloodkin, the band Bloodkin, was doing a benefit for us, and at the 40 Watt, and not many people showed up. It was kind of disappointing. And Bob had dropped by 40 Watt. He was out, had dropped by, and he was really surprised that there were so few people there. And he started reading about what we wanted to do, and he became really interested. So a day or so later, he sent me an email saying he liked what he'd read and was very interested in wanting to help, and wondered if he could meet me. So Bob and I met. And the thing I loved about his email was it was grammar was correct, punctuation was correct, and it was written in a very thoughtful, sincere way, and a mature way. And Bob was very young at the time. And so Bob and I met, and it just, I think we hit it off from the beginning, even though he's about a third of my age, but that's okay. And he was just so sincere and so kind of looking for his way in life, and not knowing quite what he wanted to do, and it seemed like a really good fit. So we just decided we'd try it out. We'd pay Bob a small stipend, and I mean a very small stipend, and just see how it would work out. And then I found out later that not only was Bob well respected in the music community, he was in a band called Michael, and he had also lost a good friend to suicide when he was in high school. But not only was he well known and well respected in the music community, he was at the community at large, which is really what I needed. So it seemed like he was the perfect combination of what I needed in that person. So Bob and I started working on this place, and he is still with me all these years later, and he has only gotten better and better, and he's done a great job.
Obviously. I mean, you're celebrating your 16th.
That's right, 16 years and we're still here. Who'd have thought?
So can you talk about, were there any challenges that you encountered between you being the founder and your heart was in this, and then Bob being an executive director, and any kind of challenges you might have faced in trying to run this place?
Yeah, as far as challenges between the director and the founder, because I know that happens. But I think I was so much older than Bob, for one thing. And I was Nucci's mom. And I mean, Bob respected me, and he leaned on me and I leaned on him. So I think there was just a mutual respect. We both were after the same thing. There were no egos like, oh no, Bob, this is mine, I want my face on it. And he was not that way either. And I think that the motivation that inspired us was such a good one. And remember, I'm Nucci's mom, and nobody's going to not be nice to me. I mean, it's kind of a catch-22 thing sometimes. But we hit it off so well, and we found out we have the same sense of humor. He I knew that Nucci would have liked Bob. He gets along really well with my other son, KP, and my husband thinks he's great. So I think we just worked together, and we got closer and closer, and we really never had any disagreements. I know that doesn't sound possible, but actually it's true.
Can you tell us, because I love the story about the sea with the...
Yeah.
Can you tell us that story, how that came about?
One of the things that, because we both like to give each other a hard time, and we do pretend fighting, and we do that really well. And so things come up, and we were trying to figure out an icon for Nucci Space. And so one day early on, they were just renovating this place. I was outside doing something, and Bob was inside, and I had this idea. Why don't we just use the Sedilla under the sea in Nucci's room, and Nucci's name, and like the Nike swish, swash, whatever. And I said, that would be great. So I ran into the space and I said, Bob, I have a brilliant idea. And he looked at me like, yeah, right. And I said, why don't we just use the Sedilla under the sea that's, in Nucci's name? He said, I have an idea too. He said, why don't we use the sea with the Sedilla? And I said, that's a great idea. So after that, it became, Bob says he came up with it, but I really came up with it. So,
Love it.
yeah.
Okay, so can you talk about too, because this is all about challenges, nonprofit space, and you guys sort of have this this perfect journey almost. it seems
Yeah,
like.
I know it sounds too good to be true, but
But great for y'all. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
So succession planning is a big topic, and avoiding this founder syndrome, so that when the founder leaves, although you're still involved, how
Right.
do y'all prep your staff and your volunteers so that I know you talked about if one of you got if something happened and you were gone, how would
Right.
this place survive?
yeah. Well, that was really important to me to know that the place would survive. It didn't take long, too many years before I realized that it was already, just after a couple of years, it was bigger than my family and bigger than Nucci. And so what I really wanted to make sure was, we didn't look to found something that would last in our lifetime and then be gone. We wanted something that would have a longevity and would continue on. And because as far as I can see, the need is there, and it only gets more. So I wanted this to go on for a long time. So when I realized it was probably time for me to start withdrawing, and I realized that for a couple of reasons. I think with a board, it's easier to disagree, and it's especially hard to disagree with me as the founder, because don't forget I'm a mama, and nobody wants to hurt Linda's feelings. But I realized it would be easier for the board to make certain decisions without having to worry about what Linda would say, in a sense, or not making a decision because they think Linda may not agree. That kind of thing. Also with the staff, as long as I was here, the staff looked at me as the boss rather than at Bob. And Bob, he was the boss. So I realized that it was time for me to pull away. And I knew it was for the betterment of the organization. And I knew that I would continue to stay involved no matter what. They're never going to be able to get rid of me. So it was important to make that change as smooth as possible. We made no big deal over it. The idea was to have it go from me to, in this case it was Will Kaiser, who took over my responsibilities, and we wanted to make that as smoothly as possible so that people wouldn't even miss Linda. And I think we did a really, really good job, and we now have Leslie, who's the advocate once Will moved on, and each advocate adds their own personality, and I think they just keep improving things. So I think it's my leaving, things have just gotten better.
You read the research, she's the exact right thing to do, isn't she?
There you go.
All the things.
Okay, I want total credit for that.
You're going to get it. So you talk about this, but how do you kind of balance this role as being the founder, but respecting Bob's?
Well, for one thing, being the founder and respecting Bob is easy for me because I made him. I brainwashed him. I shaped him, No, I have total trust in Bob. And, we all know that if there's something I don't like or I disagree with, I still, in our bylaws, I have the power to shut down Nucci Space if I don't like the way it's going. So I still have that ultimate power. But I think that it's because of the trust I have in Bob that I know his heart. I know how he feels about this whole area of mental health. So, you know, to me, he's the next best thing. Next to me, Bob knows Nucci Space better than anybody else. And I know that I have his heart and his, you know, good working ethics and all of that. So, and I don't have a huge ego, and Bob doesn't either, and we keep it healthy.
Perfect.
Hey, and we are about good mental health, right?
Right.
It would be terrible if, you know.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
Has the organization changed at all from where you thought it would go when you started it to now? Or have you encountered anything where Bob thought we should do it this way? You know, big things.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things that's kind of a joke is data. And we keep data, but we always keep it. One of the things that we do that we don't get really, credit's not the right word, but it's one of those things that's kind of hard to tally. We help a lot of people without ever sending them to professional therapy. Or, you know, I mean, I've spent hours on the phone at night from home with somebody, and that doesn't really count in with the professional counseling, that type of thing. So those things are harder to keep track of. And Bob was always on me to keep track of the things like that I did, and I just never would do it. It was always a pain for me. And Bob would say, well, did you do it? And I said, oh, no, Bob, that's just... And so as far as, if it had been left up to me, we probably wouldn't have any data now. So thank goodness for Bob. He finally insisted that I walk the line. And as far as those kinds of things, he's been terrific about. But as far as anything that's basic to Nucci Space or to the vision, or even to the... When I first started, it was two of my friends and myself. None of us are musicians. We're just three moms. And we wrote a little book called the Little Blue Book, and it was to give it's what we would take to a foundation to ask for money. It was like a proposal and talked all about us. We had 5-year goals, and actually those were all achieved. And so the basics, really the basis for Nucci Space has not changed. It's just, I think it's grown and it's fleshed out, and it's gotten better because we're able to take care of more people. And so growth in that area, and as soon as we started really getting entrenched into the community, that was just all the better for us, and that just makes our outreach more. So, but as far as the basic vision for Nucci Space, I think it's pretty much the same. And that really gives me a lot of, it feels good. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what do you think your vision is for the next 5, 10, 20, 50 years for Nucci?
As far as a vision for Nucci Space, I think what we're doing here is excellent. I mean, we want to get bigger in the sense of being able to treat more people. But what I would really like, I would like to see a Nucci Space in every community across this country. It doesn't have to be called Nucci Space, but I would like to take this model, which is very doable, and use it in other communities and tailor it to an individual community. It's cost effective. It works because we now have the data to show that it works. And one of the things I have always thought as a professional myself is in the field of mental health, and I'll talk about depression, that's what I know best. There's a big gap there in the treatment plan. Right now we know the appropriate treatment for depression is therapy, usually cognitive behavioral therapy, and medication if needed. And those two things, that's the standard appropriate treatment. But to me there's a gap there. There's a big space because you can't be in treatment, in therapy 24/7. And you know, you take medicine and you start taking medicine, and with these medications it can take 2 weeks or a month to start working. So the what's missing there is, what do you do in all those times in between? You see a therapist for an hour, and when you come out, usually you get a little pumped up, you feel better. But after a few hours or a day or so, you're right back in that real funk. And so I think that's when you need a prop. You need a place to go. You need somebody to support you. You need somebody just to talk to. It doesn't have to be a therapist. It's kind of like the bartender, you know. analogy. And I'll give you an example of how this works. Years ago, there was a young man in Athens, excellent musician, wonderful, sweetest guy you would ever want to meet. But this person has bipolar disorder or manic depressive illness. When he would be in his manic phase, he would go downtown in Athens with a paint gun and shoot people with his paint gun. Well, that wasn't exactly, acceptable to a lot of people. He scared people. The police were like, what are we going to do with this guy? Throw him in jail? What? So what we would do is when he'd be in his manic phase, we would get him to come to Nucci Space. We wouldn't let him bring his paint gun in, but he could come to Nucci Space and he can say anything he wants here. Nobody's going to judge him. We know he's sick. We're going to accept him. We're going to try to get him back into a balance. And but he's safe here. He's safe. And he knows he's not going to be judged. He's not going to be arrested. He's not going to be treated like a criminal. So it's that space, that cavity that's missing in mental health, I think. And I think that's where Nucci Space tries to fill that.
I love it. I love your space. It is very comfortable.
It is.
And that's just the word for it.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask her just like one or two more questions. Do y'all feel like I'm missing anything huge? I mean, I've covered.
Daisha, do you have the sound here?
Yes.
Okay,
sounds
good.
So, really, I just want to know what else do we need to know about Nucci's and sort of maybe why you think it's been so successful.
Yes.
Sort of, because what we're doing here is it's going to be almost an informational video for other nonprofits who are thinking about starting or who
Okay.
are having challenges. So what is the advice you would give, or what do you attribute your success to?
I think one of the things that I attribute our success to is so simple and so basic, and it's really just common humanity. I think a lot of people don't know what it means to be fully human. I don't know about you, but I was raised very strictly Catholic, and I was taught to aspire to be divine. Forget that. Most people have trouble being fully human, and maybe a lot of people don't even know what it means to be fully human. So I think that we respect people. We don't judge. And if anyone is ever rude to anybody in Nucci Space who comes into they're gone. They're gone. There's no room for that. And it sounds so simple. But I think it's the motivation and our intentions. I think intention is so much. And I think if you really fully intend to do good, you got to be good and you got to really live it. You can't just talk about it. And it's most important to get the right people. And it's like that, The Tipping Point, that book. You've got to get the right people in the right seats on the bus. And then you go. But people, it's everything. And to me, I really think that's the reason for our success. And it sounds so simple. But it is actually, we make things too complicated. And we try not to do that.
Great.
Does that answer it?
I think so. Do y'all feel like there's anything?
I haven't. I would like you to speak for a little bit about the actual technical steps of starting a nonprofit.
Okay.
Oh yeah, you cover those.
Maybe you don't have to go into all the details about each particular piece of paper. So maybe something about coming from a standpoint of not knowing about what it's like, to someone like us or someone who would has a passion or an idea to then come in and say, how difficult or time-consuming or costly is that process?
Yeah. Obviously, I knew nothing about starting a nonprofit. This is something I never even thought about doing. So when I came up with the idea to do Nucci Space, I talked to our family lawyer. And one of the things he said, first we'll establish the Nucci Phillips Memorial Foundation. And that's what we did. And actually, according to law, we do business as Nucci Space. So that was done. And then the next thing we did was to get our 501c3 tax-deductible paper from the IRS. That was not easy. One reason it wasn't easy was it's always been really hard to articulate what this place is all about, and a lot of people don't get it. They don't get the why music and mental health. They don't get the connection, and they just don't get it. And I've found that people that work with the IRS don't get a lot of things, that a lot of us do. So in order to get the 501c3, you've got all these forms to fill out, which immediately gives me these butterflies because I have form phobia. So my lawyer and my accountant said, well, don't worry, we'll walk you through it. So I filed all the papers, sent them off to the IRS, and then I get a phone call from the IRS. And it's this young woman, and she says to me, okay, so tell me, explain to me what you want to do. I don't quite understand it. I don't quite get it. Why should we give you this tax status? So I explained, and she said, well, so now how do we know that this is on the legit? And I'm by now, I'm like, well, I said, well, this is for my dead son. I'm his mother. This is a good thing. And she said, oh, right. And so I couldn't believe she said this. So I got off the phone and had a good cry. And then I called my accountant, and he said, don't worry, I'll report her to the IRS, and I'll do the rest of it. And that's what he did. But what I learned out of that is I can't be a chicken, and I can't be a weenie. I got to really stick up for myself here. And so that was the last time I cried over something like that. Because that's when I decided, I don't care what, I don't know how to do this, but I'm going to do it. So we did get our 501c3. It's important to get that first so that people get a tax deduction. And I don't blame anybody for wanting that. So then we had to set up articles of incorporation, that kind of thing. We had to set up a board, which was not easy because I knew no one in Athens. I knew one person, David Barbie, who's in the music and is now the head of the music business program at UGA. But so, of course, they were my friends on the board. Well, they'd look to me, well, Linda, what do you think? What do you want to do, Linda? It's that kind of thing. And so we kind of hobbled along for a few years until we started getting other people onto the board. And the point of the board is to raise money for you. I mean, it's plain and simple. They got to do it. So you've got to it's getting the right people in the right positions. And at this time, and it's taken years to do this for us, we have a very active board. And so those are the things that were fundamental to getting NutriSpace going and getting us to be a legitimate organization. And as far as NutriSpace goes, the staff is the next thing, getting the staff. And at this time, I think we're better off than we ever have been. We have a great board, it's an active board, and we have a great staff.
Great. I feel great about that.
Did that answer your question, Ben?
Absolutely, it's
I think that was
fantastic.
perfect.
Okay.
One real quick, something you guys had a Supreme Court case. What was the story with that?
We had, because when we first, my husband and I bought the building, and then, or the land and the building and everything, and then we deeded it up. We did a quick deed to NutriSpace, so we really don't own the building. It's owned by the Nucci Phillips Memorial Foundation. So, but because we're a 501c3, we applied for paying no property taxes. Well, people just could not get that straight. For years, we did pay property taxes, and so we appealed. We made an appeal. We were refused in the local courts, and so we took it to the Georgia Supreme Court. And we had people, I forget what it's called, when people write in for you and say this is a really, respectable, legitimate organization. They have a 501c3 tax status, and we should not be paying property taxes. And it took a few years, but finally we got our, so that we don't pay property taxes. But we ran into people who just said there's no way that we shouldn't pay property taxes. It was, I think, people who, didn't think that helping musicians was a big deal, or what we did was really that valuable to the community and that kind of thing. So, but when it went to the Georgia Supreme Court, we won our case. And our lawyer, Jim Warnes, he was great. He's done everything pro bono for us and fought very hard for us, and we appreciate it.
Wow. Just another, logistical obstacle to get in.
That was one I hadn't even thought about. I mean, we paid property taxes for several years, and we really should not have been. I mean, churches don't pay property taxes. Other 501c3s don't pay property tax. But they couldn't. They thought that what we did was not really. They thought we were a practice place for musicians, and that what we were doing was not really that much of a benefit. We didn't really, it was just a lack of understanding, and I might even say an ignorance to what we do and to mental health.
Do you think that perception around town has gotten better?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I do. I mean, I'm sure there are still people who may have those ideas. But if it's anybody who has been in here and has seen what we do, I don't think it's that way anymore. So, and if they're still here, I don't hear about them. They don't tell me about it. But you know, there's always somebody who's going to find fault or think that you're not deserving, or. But all it takes is like for one of those people who felt that way about us to have a son or a daughter to be depressed and to maybe make a suicide attempt and maybe get help from NutriSpace. Then they're believers forever. You know, so what can I say? And that's for me and my goal in writing the book is to try to dispel the stigma. Stigma kills, and stigma keeps people from getting help. And it's just wrong. And it's 2016. We've got science behind us now. We know that depression is a physical illness. So if it's the last thing I do, it'll be to wipe out stigma.
Well, I'll be behind you. I know.
Okay. Have I got you three with me?
Yes.
Good.
Of course.
Okay. You think that's it?
That's wonderful.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're very
It's at
welcome.
30 minutes on the dot. I'll
You
say.
guys are good.
You
Really
are
good.